Hi, fourth grade. This is Ms. Kovarik, and we are starting Unit 7 today. So we're on Unit 7, Lesson 1. And this whole unit is about the American Revolution. So we're going to be talking about back in the 1700s when the colonies, which was what the United States were called before we were our own country. So we were 13 colonies and they were under the control of England. So we're going to learn about some of the things that happened that led up to us becoming our own independent nation. So this lesson is called The French and Indian War Brings Change. First vocab word today is conflict. That is a noun, and that is a fight or struggle for power or authority. A turning point is a time when an important change occurs. A burden is a noun, and that is something that is heavy or difficult to accept. Impose is a verb, and that is to force or require. A tax is a noun, and that is money that the government charges for services it provides to the people. Assembly is a noun, that is people who gather to write laws for a government or organization. A petition is a noun, a document people sign to show their agreement or disagreement with something. Opposition is noun, a disagreement with or disapproval of something. Mastermind is a noun, and that is a person who takes the lead in planning and organizing something important. And then militia is a noun, ordinary people trained to be soldiers, but who are not part of the full-time military. So chapter 1 is called Bills to Pay, and our big question for this chapter is, why did the British government tax the colonists, and why did that make the colonists angry? To better understand the events that led to the American Revolution, we will have to travel back in time to the years between 1754 and 1763, when the British fought against the French in a different war on North American soil. This war, known as the French and Indian War, excuse me, was part of a larger struggle in the other countries for power and wealth. In this conflict, the British fought the French for control of land in North America. During the French and Indian War, many Native Americans chose sides. Some fought with the British, while others fought with the French. Battles were won and lost on both sides. However, as is often the case in war, there is a turning point. In this war, it was a battle fought in a part of Canada controlled by the French. In 1759, British soldiers sailed up the St. Lawrence River and attacked the French city of Quebec. The British were victorious in the Battle of Quebec and then went on to take Montreal the next year. Montreal's fall signaled the end of large battles between the French and British in North America. Sporadic fighting continued until 1763, when the Treaty of Paris officially ended the French and Indian War. And here is a picture showing the French and Indian War. So lots of different people were fighting on both sides between the French and the British. In the treaty, France agreed to give up almost all of the land it had claimed in North America. The French handed over control of this land to Great Britain. However, with new land came new responsibilities and financial burdens. So the end of this war, Britain won, so that is another word for England, and they had to acquire all of this land from their opponent, France. So you can see here, the 13 colonies were included in that. Taxes. The British government had borrowed a lot of money to fight this war. A lot of that money had been spent on protecting the colonists from the French and their Native American allies. All of the money had to be paid back, and the British government felt that the colonists should pay their share. In addition, more money was continually needed to protect the colonies as well as the newly acquired land. To raise the needed funds, the British government imposed new taxes, including several that would have to be paid by the colonists. In 1765, King George III and his government proposed the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was a tax on printed materials. Colonists were required to buy stamps when they bought printed items such as newspapers, pamphlets, even playing cards. These were not gummed stamps, but rather impressions printed on embossed paper. People were upset about the Stamp Act. They thought it was unfair that the king and his government in London were making decisions about taxes the colonists had to pay, while the colonists had no say in the matter. And this is a picture of that stamp that was printed on the paper. So it's not a stamp like to mail things. It was simply something printed on paper that said this item has a tax. So it was newspapers, pamphlets, and even playing cards. The British government had generally allowed the colonies to raise taxes themselves. For example, if the government of Virginia needed money, an assembly of representatives from different parts of Virginia would meet. This assembly was called the House of Burgesses. Members of the House of Burgesses would determine the best way to raise money. They would propose taxes and then they would vote. If many representatives thought the taxes were unfair, they would not vote for them. Therefore, the taxes would not be approved. Because the House of Burgesses included representatives from different parts of Virginia, most everyone felt the process was fair. Every colony had an assembly similar to the Virginia House of Burgesses. The assemblies weren't all called House of Burgesses, but they did the same thing. A group of representatives met to discuss new laws and taxes. Although the colonists continued to raise their own taxes even after 1765, they felt that, rather than imposing a new tax on the colonies, the king and his government should have asked these assemblies to find a way to raise the money that was needed. Instead, without even as much as a dialogue, the king and his government created the Stamp Act. They did not send it to the colonial assemblies, but directly to Parliament, part of the British government responsible for passing laws and raising taxes. And this is saying that the Stamp Act was very unpopular. The people were upset that they didn't have a say in it. They didn't get to vote on it. They were just given this tax and forced to pay. The colonists agreed that there were bills that had to be paid and they wanted to contribute, but they also wanted some say in how the money was raised. They were concerned that important decisions about taxes were being made thousands of miles away by a parliament that had no colonial representatives. This process didn't seem fair to them. Other regions outside of England, such as Scotland, had representatives in Parliament. Their job was to represent and stand up for the people of Scotland. But there were no representatives from the 13 colonies in Parliament, not even one. When the colonists became upset about the Stamp Act, they expressed their unhappiness in various ways. They held protest meetings, they wrote pamphlets, they sent petitions to London, they tried to explain why they thought the Stamp Act was unfair. This is the British Parliament, which is basically the government in England that makes decisions on laws and taxes, including those that affect the colonies. Many of the colonists were proud British subjects, but they also felt they had rights that the king and his government could not take away. Opposition to the Stamp Act spread. In Virginia, the House of Burgesses passed a motion protesting the Stamp Act. The Burgesses agreed that the British Parliament had no right to tax the people of Virginia. All right, we've got a little blurb here about Prime Minister Grenville. In 1765, the Prime Minister of Great Britain was George Grenville. He was the mastermind behind the Stamp Act. Grenville was faced with the challenge of finding money to support the thousands of British soldiers stationed in the North American colonies. As far as he was concerned, the British soldiers were protecting the colonists, so the colonists should help pay for the soldiers. At first, the British government was surprised by the colonists' response to the Stamp Act. As Prime Minister, Grenville remained unsympathetic to the colonial complaints and protests. However, he did not have widespread support, and other government ministers criticized him. He was replaced as Prime Minister in 1766. A leader emerges. George Washington fought in the French and Indian War alongside the British. He also served as a major and led a group of militia against the French in the Ohio River Valley. As a result of a successful mission against a French scouting party, Washington was promoted to colonel. He became the commander of a group of soldiers from Virginia and North Carolina. Although his next mission was not as successful, Washington had made a name for himself as a valiant leader. In 1755, he became the commander of all the Virginia militiamen. He was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses in 1758. And there is George Washington. All right, your questions for today. Remember, go back in the text and find the answer. Number 1, the turning point of the French and Indian War was the Battle of blank. Number 2, who were the French fighting in the French and Indian War? Number 3, what was the Stamp Act? Number 4, how did the colonists feel about the Stamp Act? What was their reaction? Number 5, why did the British government need money? Number 6 is true or false. The British government thought colonists should help pay the money back. Number 7, what did the colonists want in return for paying taxes? So they pay taxes. What do they want in return? Number 8, colonists protested blank with the Stamp Act. So were the colonists being violent in their protests, or were they being peaceful? And number 9, blank became a leader and was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses. All right, that is it for reading. Let's head over to skills. So as always, just a reminder, you should always complete your reading first, because most of the time, the chapter that we read in reading affects our questions and skills. So these 3 questions are about the chapter we just read. This one is an opinion question. Do you think the Stamp Act was fair? Do you think the colonists should have just paid their share instead of protesting? Or do you agree with them? Do you think the Stamp Act was unfair and that they should not have paid it? Number 2, what was the conflict that began in 1754? So go back to the reading. Look for that date, 1754. When did the French and Indian War end? So I'm looking for a year here. Look for the year that the French and Indian War ended. And then we have a little bit of word work. It says, in the chapter you read, in this conflict, the British fought for the French for control of land in North America. So we're looking at this word here, conflict. Conflict means a fight or struggle for power or authority. The conflict between 2 countries resulted in war. So I want you to tell me which of these is an example of a conflict. So a fight or a struggle for power. What part of speech is conflict? And then for 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, I give you a situation, and you're going to tell me, yes, this is a conflict, or no, this is not a conflict. So number 6, Jordan wanted to use the television to watch a movie, but his brother wanted it to play a video game. They argued over who got to use the television. Number 7, Justine wanted to stay up late, but her mother told her it was time to go to bed. Justine listened to her mother and got ready for bed. Number 8, Francisco and Daniel took turns using the skateboard. Number 9, the British and the French fought each other for land during the French and Indian War. And number 10, colonists disagreed with the Stamp Act issued by the British government. All right, that was it for lesson 1. Be sure to go back and refer to the text in both of those Google Forms and get on Zoom if you need any help. Have a wonderful day. I will see you all next time. Goodbye, Adams.